Elizabeth II had hundreds of jewels, gifts, dynastic heirlooms, pieces with grand histories. Some jewels became faithful companions, others appeared just once and retreated into shadow for decades. Today, I'm inviting you not to the main display cases, but behind the scenes, where the stories of jewelry pieces are kept, pieces that flashed for just a moment before sinking into velvet silence for decades. Ahead of us await both giants of the past and modest modern brooches whose public debut was their only one. And there were also moments when everything came down to quick thinking, like that January evening when something went wrong on the way to an important event and a replacement had to be urgently found. Before we begin, please support my channel by clicking on the like and subscribe buttons. Thank you. Sometimes a jewel's entire public life can be captured in a single evening. Such is the story of the Andamuka opal necklace, a spectacular piece that blazed briefly in the Australian sun and then retreated into the shadows of the royal vault for decades. It was March 23, 1954, and the Queen was in the midst of her 6-month Commonwealth tour when South Australia presented her with something truly extraordinary. At a state banquet in Adelaide's Parliament House, Premier Playford stood to make his presentation, and his words that evening tell us everything we need to know about this remarkable gift. So far as we know, the Andamuka opal is the finest and largest opal of its kind in Australia. The centerpiece was indeed magnificent, a 203-carat white opal that seemed to hold green fire within its depths. But here's what makes this story even more fascinating. That spectacular stone had been discovered just 5 years earlier, in 1949, when a miner's pick turned over the rough stone at a depth of 30 feet in the Andamuka opal fields. The original piece measured 4 inches by 2 inches. Imagine holding something that size and realizing you've found treasure. The finished necklace was entirely Australian-made, crafted in Adelaide itself. The Duke of Edinburgh received matching opal cufflinks, but it was the Queen's necklace that captured everyone's attention. I love how the contemporary reports noted that the Queen appeared delighted when she received this gift. You can almost sense the genuine pleasure in that formal language. But here's where the story takes an interesting turn. The following evening, March 24th, the Queen wore her new Australian treasure to the Royal Music Festival at the Wayville Oval. She paired it with Queen Mary's lover's knot tiara, creating what must have been a stunning combination of family heritage and new Commonwealth symbolism. And then, silence. That musical evening in Adelaide was the first and last time the Andamuka opal necklace appeared in public. Despite its spectacular beauty and significant weight, that 203-carat stone alone was heavier than many entire pieces of jewelry. It simply vanished from the Queen's public appearances. The necklace has appeared at a few exhibitions at Buckingham Palace over the years, allowing visitors glimpses of its fire. But as a living piece of royal jewelry, worn and enjoyed, its story ended after just one evening. Sometimes I wonder if certain pieces are meant to have these brief, brilliant moments rather than long careers. Perhaps that single evening in Adelaide, with the Queen wearing Australia's finest opal while celebrating with her Commonwealth subjects, was exactly the right length of story for this particular treasure. Sometimes the grandest pieces in a royal collection become prisoners of their own magnificence. There's an irony in jewelry history that the most spectacular creations, those massive, breathtaking pieces that took months to craft and cost fortunes, often have the shortest public lives. Today we're exploring 2 perfect examples, pieces so grand, so utterly dramatic, that they could only emerge for the most extraordinary occasions. Let's start with Queen Mary's diamond stomacher, a piece that tells the story of changing fashions better than any history book. Made for Queen Mary in 1920, this wasn't just large, it was architectural. But here's what makes this creation even more fascinating. Queen Mary commissioned it using diamonds from 2 earlier wedding gifts, a diamond stomacher given to her by the Maharaja of Cartier, and a diamond crescent from the town of Swansea, both from her 1893 wedding. She essentially recycled her past into something spectacularly new, though by 1920, stomachers were already largely out of fashion. She was creating a museum piece from day one. Composed of 3 graduated brooches, each dripping with pear-shaped and brilliant diamonds, it was designed to cover the entire front of a bodice. Queen Mary herself wore this spectacular creation publicly just once that we know of, at a state banquet for the Belgian royal family in 1922, paired with her Delhi Durbar tiara. After that single outing, it seems to have retreated into the royal vaults, perhaps too grand even for her subsequent appearances. When Queen Mary gave the stomacher to Princess Elizabeth as a wedding gift in 1947, it presented quite a challenge. The young princess was simply overwhelmed by its scale. Instead of wrestling with the full piece, she found a clever solution. She wore just the bottom portion, still dramatic but manageable for a woman not yet 25. After becoming queen, she continued to wear primarily just that bottom section through the early 1950s. But the full stomacher, all 3 magnificent brooches together as Queen Mary intended, with the queen wearing the top 2 sections for the very first time, that waited until 2002, 55 years after she first received it. For her Golden Jubilee dinner at Windsor Castle, the Queen finally wore the complete piece, paired with the Nizam of Hyderabad necklace. It was a moment that captured something profound about royal jewelry. Sometimes the most spectacular pieces need the most spectacular occasions. Now, let's turn to a piece that is perhaps one of the most famous in the entire collection, at least when it comes to royal weddings. I'm talking, of course, about Queen Mary's fringe tiara. For so many of us, this is the tiara, the one etched into our collective memory from those joyful black and white photographs of Princess Elizabeth's wedding day in 1947. It became something of a tradition, a beautiful something borrowed for Windsor brides. In 1973, it was loaned to Princess Anne for her wedding, and much more recently, Princess Beatrice wore it for her own ceremony, continuing that lovely family thread. It is truly an icon of the House of Windsor. And that is precisely what makes its story so fascinating and so full of paradox. With such a profound personal connection to her own wedding day and its established role as a family bridal diadem, you would think it would have been a regular, cherished part of her tiara rotation. But here is where the story takes its surprising turn. After that famous day in 1947, the tiara simply disappeared from view on her for years, then for decades. In a sense, the tiara came into her life on 2 very different occasions. The first time, as a young bride, it was a precious loan from her mother for that one special day. It was a symbol of her wedding, but it wasn't yet hers to keep. It remained in the Queen Mother's personal collection. So it wasn't until 2002, upon her mother's death, that she formally inherited it, and the tiara became truly hers. It had returned to her, this time as part of her mother's legacy. And even then, she didn't wear it. The years passed. The Diamond Jubilee approached, until finally, in November 2009, on a state visit to Trinidad and Tobago. There, 62 years after it first graced her as a young bride walking down the aisle, Queen Elizabeth II appeared once again in Queen Mary's fringe tiara. 62 years. The gap is just astonishing, isn't it? It makes you wonder what memories stirred when she chose it from among all her options that evening. Sometimes, the smallest jewels tell the biggest stories about royal preferences. While we've been exploring those grand, spectacular pieces that rarely saw daylight, there's another category entirely: the modest gifts and delicate brooches that, despite their intimate scale, proved equally elusive in the Queen's public wardrobe. These pieces remind us that size isn't everything when it comes to rarity. Let's start with what might be the most meaningful small brooch in the collection: a golden spray of flowering gum, designed to look like a eucalyptus branch and set with several black opals. This was a wedding present to Princess Elizabeth in 1947 from the Returned Sailors and Soldiers Imperial League of Australia, a gift that carried deep symbolism as both a wedding token and a tribute from Commonwealth veterans. You'd think such a thoughtful wedding gift would have become a treasured regular piece, but the Opal branch proved remarkably camera-shy. What's clear is that despite featuring Australia's national stone and carrying such personal significance, this wedding gift spent most of its 7 decades tucked away in the royal jewelry boxes. But if the opal brooch was elusive, the Czech garnets were practically invisible. In 1996, during a state visit to the Czech Republic, the Queen received a complete suite from the city of Brno, a necklace, bracelet, brooch, and earrings, all featuring deep red Bohemian garnets set in 18-karat gold. The craftsman, Jiří Urban, had just 1 month to create the set, and he drew inspiration from early 19th century classical jewelry, even referencing a garnet suite that Goethe had once given to Ulrike von Levetzow. Here's a charming detail that suggests the Queen genuinely appreciated this gift. When leaving Brno, she didn't hand the jewelry case to her entourage as protocol might dictate. Instead, she kept the precious case on her lap throughout the departure, a small but telling gesture of personal attachment. Yet for all that apparent appreciation, the Czech garnets became some of the most overlooked treasures in her collection. The complete suite, necklace, bracelet, and earrings, never appeared in public. Not once. The only piece that ever saw daylight was the brooch, and even that had just one moment of glory. New Year's Day 2006, when the Queen wore it to church at Sandringham. 1 brooch, 1 morning, 1 brief appearance in 10 years, and that was it for the Czech garnets. The final chapter of our small but rare story involves 2 modern brooches that barely registered on the royal jewelry radar. First, there's the aquamarine and diamond laurel brooch, a petite rectangular aquamarine surrounded by delicate diamond laurel branches. Despite being in the Queen's collection since at least the 1980s, she rarely wore it in public, though eagle-eyed royal watchers did spot it on a couple of occasions. Small, elegant, and practically forgotten. Even more mysterious is the coral and onyx paisley brooch, a modern piece with a distinctive paisley pattern in pink coral and black onyx, edged with small diamonds. Royal jewelry enthusiasts believe it dates to the 1970s and may have been presented during a visit to Birmingham, though that's still speculation. What we know for certain is that it emerged from the shadows just once, at a garden party at Holyrood House in Edinburgh in July 2019, where it perfectly complemented the Queen's bright pink coat. There's something fascinating about these miniature rarities. They weren't too grand for regular wear like the stomacher, or too emotionally loaded like the wedding tiara. They were simply overlooked. Perhaps it's a reminder that even the most organized jewelry collection in the world can have pieces that somehow slip through the cracks of daily choice. Or perhaps the Queen, with hundreds of brooches at her disposal, simply had favorites that left little room for the rest. Sometimes a single sentence can echo across more than a century, carrying the weight of imperial history and personal devotion. When Queen Mary received a spectacular carved emerald brooch from the ladies of India during the Delhi Durbar in 1911, she penned words that would prove remarkably prophetic. But we'll come back to that extraordinary promise in a moment. First, let me paint you the scene of this remarkable gift. During that grand imperial ceremony in Delhi, a deputation of Indian ladies, led by the Maharani of Patiala, presented Queen Mary with this hexagonal emerald brooch, a stone carved on both sides with a rose on one face and intricate floral designs on the other. Set in silver and gold with a glittering diamond border, it was crafted specifically to honor the first meeting between an English queen and the ladies of India. Queen Mary was so moved by this gesture that she wrote a letter to the ladies of India that reads almost like a royal prophecy. "Your jewel shall pass to future generations as an imperial heirloom and always stand as a token of the first meeting of an English queen with the ladies of India." future generations as an imperial heirloom. How perfectly she understood the lasting power of this gift. And yet, when it did pass to Queen Elizabeth II in 1953, it seemed to slip quietly into the shadows of the royal collection. For decades, this meaningful piece remained largely unworn, emerging only occasionally for the most discreet daytime appearances and audiences. Perhaps most fittingly for our modern age, one of its final appearances was during those memorable virtual audiences of 2022, when the Queen conducted diplomatic meetings via video link from Windsor Castle. But Queen Mary's prophecy continues to unfold. The emerald brooch has found new life with Queen Camilla appearing at Royal Ascot in 2024, a reminder that these imperial heirlooms truly do pass from generation to generation, just as Queen Mary envisioned over a century ago. From the deep green of that historic emerald, we turn to the brilliant white diamonds of the Queen Mother's Cartier lily brooch. And this is a jewel on an entirely different scale. Created by Cartier in 1939 for Queen Elizabeth, the then Queen Consort, this is a piece of pure, unapologetic glamour. It's an enormous cascading spray of lilies glittering with diamonds. This is not a subtle jewel, it's a true showstopper. It was a piece the Queen Mother wore quite often, especially in the years after the war, so it was very much associated with her. After her death in 2002, this dramatic piece faced the same challenge as so many inherited royal jewels. How does one wear something so distinctively associated with its previous owner? Queen Elizabeth II found her answer in March 2010 at a state banquet for South Africa's President Zuma. Paired with Queen Alexandra's Kokoshnik tiara and the South African diamond necklace, the lily brooch made its triumphant return, a magnificent statement about continuity and renewal. The brooch appeared once more in an official portrait used for the 2017 Iraq and Afghanistan Memorial Program, a quiet but meaningful tribute that honored both the Queen Mother's memory and the brooch's enduring significance. Of all the jewels in the royal collection, tiaras hold a special place. They are the ultimate symbols of majesty, worn for the grandest of occasions. But what happens when a tiara appears just once on the monarch herself, creating a single unforgettable image before vanishing into legend? These are the ghost tiaras, pieces whose stories are defined by their extraordinary rarity. Our first is a piece of serene and elegant beauty, the aquamarine ribbon tiara. Its design is just lovely. 5 striking oval aquamarines, set within a delicate, glittering framework of diamond ribbons and bows. We know the Queen possessed this tiara, and yet there is only one photograph, one single documented occasion where she ever wore it. The date was July 1970. The place was Yellowknife, in the Northwest Territories of Canada, during a royal tour. For a formal banquet, the Queen appeared in this beautiful aquamarine and diamond creation. And then, that was it. For the remaining 52 years of her reign, she never wore it in public again. After that one appearance, it simply vanished from sight for decades. Such a long absence naturally leads to questions. Was it a piece she simply didn't favor? Was it, as some speculated, eventually dismantled for other projects? It remained a quiet mystery for years. But the tiara had a second act in its story, just not with the Queen. Decades later, it re-emerged, loaned to the then Countess of Wessex, who wore it beautifully on several occasions. More recently, it has been worn by Queen Camilla, so we know the tiara survived and is still a cherished part of the royal collection. And that, I think, makes its story even more intriguing. It wasn't a jewel that was unloved or forgotten, but for some reason, its moment with Queen Elizabeth II was destined to be a single, solitary evening in the Canadian North. But if the aquamarine tiara is a quiet, gentle ghost, our next story is pure, heart-stopping drama. This is the tale of an emergency, a broken jewel, and a last-minute rescue. The scene is London, January 1973. The occasion is a major one. The Fanfare for Europe Gala at the Royal Opera House, a glittering event to mark Britain's entry into the European Economic Community. The Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh are on their way en route from Windsor. For such an important evening, she had chosen one of her grandest and most historic pieces, the Vladimir tiara. And then, disaster struck. Somewhere on that journey from Windsor to London, the frame of the precious tiara snapped. It broke. We can only imagine the conversation in the royal car. They were minutes away from the Royal Opera House with no time to return to Windsor, no time to divert to Buckingham Palace for a replacement, and no way for a court jeweler to perform a miracle on the roadside. The Queen of the United Kingdom was about to arrive at a major international gala with a broken tiara. This is where the hero of our story enters. In the household at the time was her trusted equerry and deputy master of the household, Lord Plunket. And as fate would have it, Lord Plunket lived in an apartment just around the corner from the Royal Opera House. In an incredible moment of quick thinking, a plan was hatched. Lord Plunket, as he later recounted, dashed home, opened his safe, and retrieved his own family's tiara. The Queen's car made a quick stop. The Plunket tiara was handed over, and Her Majesty put it on right there and then, arriving at the gala perfectly poised, as if nothing had happened at all. And this isn't just a wonderful royal rumor. The story is entirely true, confirmed in a letter by members of the Plunket family themselves. So for one night, and one night only, the Queen wore a tiara that didn't belong to the crown, but to the family of her quick-thinking courtier. It's an extraordinary story of loyalty and grace under pressure, and it gave us the single, legendary appearance of the Plunket tiara on a British monarch. What a moment in history. But there is one more tiara we must discuss, and it's a different kind of ghost altogether. This one is no obscure family heirloom. On the contrary, it's one of the most famous and historically important tiaras in the entire royal collection. It's hard to call it a ghost, because so many of us know it so well. And yet, on Queen Elizabeth II herself, it was seen just once. I'm talking about the magnificent Indian circlet. Its story is a wonderful royal love story, as it was designed by Prince Albert for his beloved Queen Victoria. Originally, it was set with opals, his favorite gemstone. But after Victoria, the tiara's journey became quite complicated. Her successor, Queen Alexandra, had a well-known dislike for opals, believing them to be bad luck, and had them replaced with the glorious Burmese rubies we see today. But intriguingly, after all that effort, neither she nor the great jewel collector Queen Mary were ever photographed wearing it. The tiara languished in the vaults until 1937, when it found its true champion, Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. From the moment she first wore it, it became one of her absolute signature pieces. She looked magnificent in it and wore it consistently for the next 50 years. It became profoundly associated with her. Now, this is where the story gets really interesting. The Indian circlet was designated an heirloom of the crown, meaning it should have automatically passed to the new monarch in 1952. But Queen Elizabeth II, seeing how much her mother adored it, graciously allowed her to continue wearing it for the rest of her life. So, in 2002, after the Queen Mother's death, the famous tiara finally came into the Queen's possession, and for years we waited and wondered if she would wear this historic masterpiece so linked to her mother's memory. And then, in November 2005, during a state visit to Malta, she did. For a glittering state banquet, the Queen appeared in the Indian circlet. And it was glorious. But that was it. That one single, magnificent appearance was the only time she ever wore it. Perhaps it was so profoundly her mother's tiara in her mind, or perhaps it just wasn't her style. Whatever the reason, it remains one of the most remarkable one-wear wonders in her entire reign. We've spent some time with the magnificent tiaras, the grandest jewels of all. But now, let's turn to the more intimate side of the collection, to the rich color of gemstones and the sleek elegance of a classic bracelet. Let's start with one of the oldest sets in the entire royal collection, the Kent Amethyst Demi-Parure. This beautiful suite originally belonged to Princess Victoria of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld, the Duchess of Kent and mother of Queen Victoria. Made in the first half of the 19th century, it's a comprehensive collection featuring a necklace, earrings, 3 brooches, and a pair of hair combs, all set with gorgeous purple amethysts surrounded by diamonds. Now, here's where the story becomes interesting from a numbers perspective. When Queen Elizabeth II inherited this set in 1952, she had multiple options for how to wear it. The complete ensemble, necklace, earrings, and brooch with pendants together, made only one significant public appearance during her entire 70-year reign. That singular moment came during a state visit to Portugal in March 1985, when she paired the full amethyst suite with the girls of Great Britain and Ireland tiara. One state banquet, one complete appearance, that's it. The brooch itself was far luckier than its companion pieces. While the Queen wore it frequently throughout her reign, she clearly preferred the simplified version without the 3 pendant drops. With the pendants attached, the brooch appeared only a handful of times for particularly significant occasions, including that state visit to the United States in 1991 and her 40th anniversary of accession celebrations in 1992. But the individual brooch without the pendants became one of the Queen's absolute favorites, appearing regularly throughout her later years. She wore it constantly with purple outfits, and it became such a reliable part of her wardrobe that jewelry watchers could almost predict its appearance whenever she chose lavender or violet. From the 19th century grandeur of the amethysts, we move to the sleek, sophisticated glamour of the Art Deco era, and to a bracelet with a much more private story. According to Angela Kelly's book, Queen Mary left her granddaughter a fabulous set of 4 Art Deco bracelets, one with a ruby, one with an emerald, one with a sapphire, and this beautiful aquamarine example. This aquamarine bracelet is a beautiful, elegant piece, but its story is one of extreme rarity. It made its one and only known public appearance in 2010. The occasion wasn't a grand state banquet, but something far more personal: the 70th birthday party for her dear friend and cousin, King Constantine of Greece. The choice of such a personal event tells us everything, doesn't it? This was clearly a jewel reserved for warm, private moments, which makes its single, fleeting appearance all the more special. Each of these pieces is a little story frozen in precious stones and metal. Some sparkled just once before disappearing into shadow. Others waited decades for their moment to shine. What strikes me most is that even in our age of total documentation, royal treasures continue to guard their secrets. Tell me honestly, did you remember all of today's jewelry pieces? Which one would you most want to see on Queen Camilla or Catherine, Princess of Wales, in the near future? And what do you feel when some forgotten brooch or tiara suddenly surfaces from the depths of the royal collection? The same excitement I do? Because that's exactly what makes royal jewels so magical. They can still surprise us even after centuries. Thank you for being with me today. If this journey into the world of rare royal treasures was interesting, please like the video, subscribe so you don't miss new stories, and definitely turn on notifications. See you in the next episode.